Hello, bird class. How's everybody doing today? I think I see somebody in the chat trying to figure out how you color on the screen. So let me explain this. I'm going to walk through this myself, make sure I know what I'm doing. Take your mouse and either at the top or the bottom of the screen, there should be a black bar. And it has a bunch of different things listed on it, like mute, chat. One of the things says annotate, and it looks like there's a little pencil on it. Hang on a second. When you click that, it pulls up another bar, and you have the option to draw or put stamps on the screen. And if you click on draw, you'll find straight lines and curved lines and circles and arrows. And there's also a thing called format, which will determine how thick your line is and give you some color options. And that is how you color on the screen. And I see everybody's going to town with this. I'm not sure why some people might be having trouble finding this. If you're using a tablet or a cell phone, it might be complicated. Somebody said if you have a Mac, it's at the top. Somebody else said there's a place that lists options. So obviously a lot depends on the type of computer that you have. All right, and everybody's going to town. I hate to do this, but we have to stop drawing. And that means I also have to erase everything that you guys have done. This is so much fun. You guys have done a great job on this one. Okay. All right. Announcements. There is a quiz up, which is due, of course, before midnight on Sunday, and short answer questions, again, due before midnight on Sunday. A lot of you guys have already been putting in your requests for project topics. That's great. You are not required to submit those yet. They're not due until sometime in March. So if you don't have an idea yet, there's no rush for this. However, a few topics have been taken. All right, so last time we kind of finished talking about feathers. And how do we clip the feathers on the bird's wings? Okay, I can go over that one again. You're going to have to excuse my crappy drawing skills. I'm not good on the whiteboard, and I'm even worse on this. All right, so bird's feather, bird's wing. These feathers here, the longest feathers on the wing, boy, that doesn't look like a wing, does it? These are the primary flight feathers. These are the ones you want to cut, and you can clip them with nice sharp scissors. You don't need a special tool. You want to make sure none of them are blood feathers. Because we should remember, if you clip a blood feather, that bird needs to go to the vet. There is a chance that it could bleed out. Even if you stop the bleeding now, it's at high risk for that bleeding to start up again. So it's just cutting the primary flight feathers, making sure you're not cutting blood feathers. There's a lot of debate and discussion about, do you need to cut all of them? Do you just need to cut a few of them? One wing versus two. So a lot of that is going to be up to you. You do need to remember, though, that birds that have clipped flight feathers have been known to manage to fly anyway. So it's not a guarantee that the bird will not be able to fly. So that's a very, very important thing to remember if you're going to clip the feathers on the bird's wings. If it was Mary, yes, go ahead.
What would happen if we accidentally clipped one of the other wings?
What, the secondaries?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a disaster. It's just unnecessary and very unattractive. It would not help, though. So if you think, well, if I keep cutting the secondaries, maybe that'll guarantee my bird can't fly. No, it won't. All right, so I hope that clears that up. Now, going back to the feet. Personally, I don't have a bird right now. I've had secondhand birds in the past. I don't clip flight feathers. It's a personal decision, but if it doesn't guarantee the bird can't fly, if the bird gets out, I want it to be able to fly well, if it can fly at all. If it's going to fly away from me, I want it to be able to fly well. It improves survival chances. Although in Massachusetts, most bird species are not going to be able to survive in the wild for very long. The winters are just too harsh. But every now and then, a parakeet shows up at somebody's bird feeder. So, okay. Feet. When we talk about feet, we can say form follows function, which basically means you can look at the shape of the feet and have some ideas of how that bird uses its feet. So the shape of the feet goes with the bird's lifestyle. These guys, long leg with relatively flat feet when they put them down, that's a bird that's going to be standing on primarily flat surfaces. They can perch, but they don't perch as much. When we look at feet, the legs and the feet of birds are covered with scales, just like you would see on a lizard. These are protective, just like scales are on a lizard. So the birds don't have naked skin exposed on their legs and feet. And you can tell this bird is a swimmer because it's got that webbing between the toes. the legs of a bird have the same parts that our legs have. Can I go back 1 second? Taylor, is this the one you wanted or one more? This one? Do I need to repeat some of it, or are you just writing it down? Just missed a word. Okay, no problem. Thank you for slowing me down there. I can get talking too fast sometimes. All right. So this is the bird's version of a pelvis. They have a femur, just like our leg has a femur. They have a patella, which is the same thing as our kneecap. The lower leg, the bone here is modified a little bit, but it's like your leg. There are two bones. One's very small, one's kind of big. And then their feet are a little bit different. A lot of the bones that would normally be in the foot are fused together. And then they have digits, just like we have fingers and toes. Now you're probably looking at this and thinking, that's not what I see on a feathered bird. Well, you're right, because on birds, the feathers and the body kind of come down here. And so the femur does not show when on a bird. And sometimes the feathers will extend even further on some species. So this is the body wall, but the feathers can extend even further. So here is a picture that kind of gives you a comparison. So here is a barn owl, and you can see the legs, and you can see here is a joint. It's the ankle joint. A lot of people think it's the knee. The knee is somewhere up here. Here's one that's had all the feathers removed, so you can see more clearly. Here's the ankle joint. The knee is still up here. And here's a skeleton. There's the ankle joint. This bone here, let me color that. This bone right here, probably make that red. This bone right here, that's the femur. And the knee is right here. So it looks quite a bit different than our legs, even though they have the same bones. And yeah, birds are mostly feathers. So I like this one. We're not going to learn most of these words here, so don't worry so much. But it shows a human skeleton in the same position as a bird skeleton. So here's the femur and the femur on the person. The lower leg on the person. The ankle on the person. And so here is a live bird. And we've got a couple of terms written here. I want to make sure that we know these terms. We don't have to know all of them. The long bone that you see up Next to the body is the tibiotarsus. The tarsometatarsus is what appears to be a lower bone. Digits are the toes, and the ankle is right there. So the knee is going to be up here, hidden underneath all those feathers. So make sure you write those words down. Yes, Mary.
Can you go over that again?
Yes, I can. How much do I need to go back over?
Starting from the tibiotarsus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I can. The tibiotarsus is the equivalent of, so this is my lower leg here. It's the equivalent to this bone. Excuse the sweatpants. So it's what appears to be the top part of the leg in a live bird. This joint is the ankle joint. And then we have a bone. It's modified from bones that we have here in our foot. And that's the tarsometatarsus. Ooh, big fancy words here. And the digits are the toes. So I'm going to stop screen sharing for a second, and we're going to look at Sassy. So here's Sassy. This right here, way up here, that's her ankle joint. So it's very different than on the long-legged waders. This is the tarsometatarsus on her. She does have a bone up here. I can feel it, but I can't really show it to you because the feathers are so dense. That's the tibiotarsus up here. And then digits are here. It's just her toes. So depending on the type of bird, you might not even be able to see the tibiotarsus because of all the feathers. All right. Now, birds do have a patella, which is the kneecap. Our kneecap is called a patella as well. So the patella, also called the kneecap. Now, not all species have a kneecap. Not all mammals have one, not all birds have one. And it's in some animals, it's fibrous or made of cartilage instead of bone. In us, that's made of bone. And what's really important about the kneecap is it acts like a spring, and it holds energy primarily during running. So animals that run a lot are more likely to have a kneecap than animals that don't run very much. And my example, this drawing is an ostrich. So this is an ostrich knee, and they actually have two patella. And this is probably a big part of why they can run so fast. And I'm probably the only person who cares about this, but I do think it's pretty cool. But I think ostriches are pretty cool too. Can I stay on this slide for another minute? Yes, I can. I can tell poor Sassy has been sitting up on a shelf since last spring. I have to put her out of the way for my cats because they'll jump on her. And so she doesn't get dusted very much. All right. If you haven't yet, take a quick pic of this so we can move on. All right, more big fancy words. There are several ways the toes on a bird can be organized. These are two of the most common ones. Ansiodactyl, which is found primarily in perching birds, and that's 3 toes forward and 1 toe back. So I can't quite make my hand do it, but it's kind of like that. And I really can't make my hand do zygodactyl. Oops. Oh, shoot. I meant to change the color there. Zygodactyl is 2 toes forward and 2 toes back. And these are birds that grasp things. So that includes parrots. It includes woodpeckers who have to use those toes to hold on to the side of a tree trunk. And it includes things like osprey, which have to grab hold of struggling, slippery fish. There are several other ways that the feet can be arranged. But these are the only 2 that we're going to actually, that you're actually likely to see in captive birds. Okay. So that's just 2 words. Now, when birds perch, when birds sleep, they're usually perched. And if you've ever thought about that, do you want to sleep on your feet? You have to constantly use muscles to stay on your feet. It's not comfortable for most types of animals to sleep that way. And birds have a really funky way of being able to perch without using muscles. So here's a bird leg. And in gray, let me mark these for you. There's there are these tendons that run down the back of the leg and into the toes. And they connect all the way up here to the femur. And when the bird is perched and sitting, kind of squatting down, these tendons are pulled tight like a rubber band. And so when they're being pulled tightly, they pull on the toes and pull the toes into a curled position. And I forgot to bring a rubber band. I always forget to bring a rubber band to demonstrate this one. But imagine there's a rubber band coming down the back of Sassy's leg, down the back. When she sits back like this and her heel, her ankle is highly bent, that rubber band is pulled tight and it pulls the toes into that curled position. I hope you guys can kind of picture this. It allows the bird, oh, that was a bad drawing. It allows the bird to perch without using any energy. So the bird is perching without using muscles or energy. Instead, it uses tendons. Okay, getting ready to move on here. So if they are squatting, sitting over flat feet on the ground, their tendon is still pulling on their toes, but birds that kind of squat back on flat ground, they don't need the same, the tendon doesn't need to work the same way. It doesn't need to pull those toes closed because they are perching on a flat surface. So things like ducks, the tendon doesn't work quite the same way in ducks, even though I showed you on Sassy. She's the only stuffed bird I have. Chickens do have that because chickens normally like to perch on a branch or in a tree at night. That was a good question. Thank you. Made me think about that one. So do birds need 2 feet? Well, not always. So many, many types of birds do quite well in the wild with 1 foot. So here's a nice mourning dove that only has 1 leg. You see this in a fair number of songbirds. They do pretty well. Amazingly, I have seen shorebirds, those little wading birds that run along the surf. I've seen some of those with only 1 leg that seem to be doing just fine. So a lot of birds can do quite well with only 1. Parrots are a big exception. Yeah, seagulls only need 1 leg. Absolutely. Parrots do not do well with only 1 leg. They really need, they use their feet like we use our hands. So they really do need to be able to manipulate things with their feet. I've heard of some in captivity that manage with 1 foot, but most of the time, not so much. And since we're talking about missing legs, when I was doing wildlife rehabilitation, we would get calls during the winter, every winter, from one area about a 3-legged deer. And we got these calls several years in a row. So the deer clearly survived multiple years with only 3 legs. It's amazing what animals can do. I mean, we'd probably die of shock if we didn't have modern medicine and we lost a leg or something, but you know, wild animals can do it. We're wimps compared to them. Yeah, a deer with 3 legs, a wild deer. Yep, absolutely. So this is just, it looks like a cockatoo's feet right here. You can see how they've got 2 toes coming forward. You can only see one right here going back, but the other one's going back also. They also climb a lot and they use their feet when climbing. So let's talk about bird toenails. Just like dogs and cats, birds' toenails need to be trimmed regularly. Just like wild coyotes or bobcats wear their nails down just through use, wild birds wear their nails down just by use. But in captivity, they don't usually do that. And nail trimming in a bird is similar to in a dog or cat. There's a quick, which is a blood vessel in the nail. So you should trim small amounts, small parts of the nail at a time. And rougher perches can cut down on the frequency I'm not talking about sandpaper perch covers. Those irritate the feet, but this green perch right here, I think that's made of concrete. It's kind of tough, and that will help the bird wear down its nails a little bit. Ideally, perches should be made of wood. Most of them should be like these that are this one's manzanita. This one might be manzanita. They're not straight. We're gonna talk about that right now. Birds need a lot of variety in their perches. Okay, yep. So different materials are good. So wood, maybe a couple of concrete ones, mix it up. Different widths are good. So some of them that are much wider around than others are good. These that have bends in them, like on these lovebirds here, these are really good. These perches are good because it helps the bird exercise their feet and legs a little bit. And it's more interesting for them. I mean, it's a small amount of mental stimulation, but every little bit counts, right? generally speaking, the larger around the perch, the better. You see a lot of perches for sale that are very, very small around. And when the bird perches, the toes, there's the toe coming from the back, the toes can touch around these small perches. You don't want most of your perches to be like that. You want most of them so that the bird's foot, the toes are not touching, that there's some space there. You also want to clean perches regularly with 10% bleach and rinse them well. What I used to do is I had multiple sets of perches, and some of them would be dirty because, let's be honest, I don't always clean as fast as things get dirty. But there would always be some clean ones available. If the birds pooped on the perch, I could swap it out. And then when it was time to do a batch, I would wash the whole batch at once in bleach, soak them in water to get that bleach off, then let them dry. But because I had excess perches, I had time for that process. You can use natural branches. These don't generally stand up well to repeated washings, and you need to make sure the area you get them from does not have insecticides and herbicides applied on a regular basis. So you don't want to use this from, say, an apartment complex where they spray herbicides and insecticides on the buildings and the grass. But if you live and you back up to a wilderness area, you can take branches from the wilderness area. And as I mentioned before, wider around is better, and diversity is better. Okay, getting ready to move on. Aren't certain types of wood toxic? Yes. However, okay, so if you're collecting wild wood, don't use pine trees. That's a really good point. Don't use pine trees. If they're wild native trees in New England, to the best of my knowledge, they're all safe. The trees that I can think of that are potentially toxic are all cedar. Yeah, that's a good point. You guys, you're getting me here. No pine trees, no cedar. Yeah, probably shouldn't use cedar either. Anything that's that has kind of a resin is probably not good. But things like maples, oaks, sweet gums, those are all really good. And if you can't identify the tree, probably is better just to buy them. And I'm making a note. So next year, when I teach this part, I'll remember to talk about which tree species. Good job, guys. Okay. When we talk about bird feet, we have to talk about bumblefoot. Bumblefoot is a general term for foot infections in birds. So any kind of infection on the bottom of the foot is called bumblefoot. These must be treated by a vet. And they are more likely to happen in dirty situations. Oh, you guys learned a little bit about it in small mammals. Yes, small mammals and reptiles can get bumblefoot. Cleanliness is really, really important in birds. Keeping the bird's cage clean, keeping those perches clean, really reduces the risk of this kind of thing. Okay, got that all copied down? And then there are mites. There are multiple kinds of mites that infect birds. And mites can infect the feathers, the feet, and the face around the beak. So these are external parasites. And again, it requires vet care. You can't treat this yourself. You really need to get a vet involved. If we look at this bird's foot, you can see the scales are kind of sticking up and yellowy. That is an unhealthy foot. And on this budgie, you can see there's stuff. It almost looks like pitting on the surface of the beak and on the face around the beak. These are all signs of mites. And there are different species of mite, so it's not just a species, but we don't really need to worry about that. If your bird has mites, it's vet time. Prevention, however, can be done, and it includes a good diet, regular exercise, mental stimulation, and a low stress lifestyle. All of the things I would like to have in my life. But stress makes birds more vulnerable to this. Bad diet makes them more vulnerable to this. Never getting out of their cage, not getting exercise makes them more vulnerable. So it's important to do all of those things. Now, I have seen things for sale in pet stores that are you're supposed to hang on the side of the cage and it's supposed to repel mites. Don't use those. They're not going to do anything, one. Two, if they've got some kind of insecticide in it, that can get into the bird's respiratory tract, and it might make the bird feel worse. They might make them feel sick. So avoid those sorts of things. And that is the end of the external anatomy part of this discussion. Anything you want me to go over again about external anatomy? All right. In that case, I'm going to clear all of this and we will move on to talk about small cage birds. The finches and the canaries. All right, so these types of birds are all in the group known as passerines, same as sparrows and cardinals and a lot of the birds that you see in your backyard. The canary was originally domesticated in the 17th century. So modern day domestic canaries are very, very different from wild canaries. And there are wild canaries, but they don't look the same and they don't behave the same. Unlike a lot of parrots, for example, you take a canary and release it into the wild. If it's a domestic canary, the chances of it surviving are pretty darn low. Zebra finches and society finches are also long domesticated. I haven't found a date for either of these, but it's the same kind of story. Behaviorally and appearance-wise, they're very different from wild zebra finches and society finches. Now, this guy looks a lot like a wild zebra finch, but it's a domestic one. Wild ones are actually a little bit smaller in size. So there are physical differences that have occurred during domestication. Generally speaking, canaries, zebra finches, society finches do very well in captivity if they're well taken care of. So these guys, domesticated versions do well. There are some species of finch that are still taken from the wild for the pet trade. It's not legal in the US, of course. They can end up in the legal pet trade. Somebody somewhere breaks the law and it just kind of snowballs, right? Wild caught birds are never going to do as well in captivity as captive bred and raised. So these are some of the less common captive birds. This is a cordon bleu. I know it's called something else in the caption, but it's a cordon bleu. Oh, that's this guy. This is often called an owl finch in the pet trade. And these are goulions. So these are relatively common finches that you can see in the pet trade. Mostly captive bred, not going to do as well as the zebra finches or society finches. So with these small cage birds, Small meaning the bird is small, not the cage. We like big cages. These birds are very susceptible to drafts and cold weather. So you have to be aware of if you've got leaky windows, leaky door frames. You don't want that breeze, that cold winter breeze coming across your pet birds. They're often not handled. So vet visits can be dangerously stressful. These are birds that handling, if they're not, oops, that should be dangerous. If they're not used to being handled, they can die from being handled. The amount of stress can be that severe. So ideally, you want to handle these birds, even though we don't think of them as birds that you tend to handle. You want them to be comfortable with it. Now I'm going to go, everybody got this part? I'm going to go to the whiteboard for a sec. Okay. Canaries. A well taken care of canary can live between 20 and 30 years. A well taken care of zebrafinch can live for 20 years. How long do you think canaries usually live as pets? How long is the life expectancy of a typical pet canary? $16, $10. Oh, good. You guys are thinking right here. Between 8 and 15 years. So their lifespan is significantly shorter than it could be. And zebra finches, it's the same story. Typically, pet zebra finches live 3 to 6 years. Yeah, upsetting but expected. Absolutely. It all comes down to the quality of care. And there's a little bit of a problem with poor breeding. I'm sure you guys are aware of puppy mills. A lot of the birds that you see in these big box pet stores come from the same kind of situation. So PetSmart, Petco, don't buy birds there. The first number, how long can they live? That's not in the wild. That is a well cared for bird in captivity. So yeah, poor breeding contributes to this shorter than possible lifespan, as well as quality of care. All right. back to the PowerPoint. Have you ever heard the phrase canary in a coal mine? Yeah, okay, good. What does it mean? What does canary in a coal mine mean? Not sure. Okay. Sounds like somebody's heard about it. Yes, a couple of people have heard about this one. Good. So we use this phrase to say this is a warning of a problem. So we'll say that frogs are a water quality canary in a coal mine. If the frogs start dying, that's a sign of poor water quality in the area. Coal miners used to take canaries into the mines. Birds are much more susceptible to toxic gases that can sometimes show up in the mines. And so if the bird shows signs that they're having trouble breathing, or if it dies, that tells the coal miners that they need to get out of the mine now, because the gases are building up and it could become toxic for the people very soon. Now, the coal miners liked their canaries, and so some of them came up with these devices. This is an oxygen cylinder on the top of the cage. And so if the canary started acting sick, they could flood the cage with oxygen and carry the bird out with them and keep it alive. And I'm really talking about this because a lot of things that we use in our household can get into the air inside buildings and be toxic to birds. Some cleaning products have things that can get into the air and make your bird sick. Things that have a lot of fragrance. Why does that look misspelled? Fragrance, there we go. Teflon. So Teflon's kind of been phased out, but it was a material used to coat nonstick pans for a long time. And when it heats, it goes into the atmosphere, and that can make birds sick. That new carpet, new furniture smell, that can make your birds sick. Pesticides can make your bird sick. Mary, yes.
My brother had a bird that died from that Teflon thing. It was awful.
Yeah. Yeah, it can definitely kill them. So 2 points on this. One is the obvious one. You have to be careful with your cleaning products. If you've got a bird, oops, you want to use things like just plain soap and water. It works. It takes a little more elbow grease than a lot of cleaning products, but it will clean the house and it will kill the germs on surfaces. And if you need scrubbing powder, scrubbing power, you can use baking soda, and that's very safe to use. You don't want to spray Febreze everywhere. That's going to be bad for the bird. The second thing I want to say is canaries in a coal mine die because of toxic gases, and birds can die because of certain things like Teflon, pesticides, certain cleaning products. Does that make you stop and think? It certainly makes me stop and think. I'm very cautious about what cleaning products I use because there's a lot of those things. They're very poorly regulated. It kind of worries me. Okay. Going on now. Let's talk about diet. I bet most of you guys, if you're thinking of canaries and finches, you're thinking of seed. Well, guess what? Seed is not a complete diet. What happened? What's the difference between eating seeds in captivity and eating seeds in the wild? The captive seeds, the stuff that you can buy in the store, has lower diversity, and it's going to be older. So certain vitamins, especially vitamin D, will break down. And there's this other bit. Wild birds usually also eat some insects. So that's not going to be in a seed mix. So we have to think about this when we're thinking about what to feed our birds. There are pellet mixes. This one has dyes in it to make it look more appetizing. Pelleted diets are generally better than seed. They're more complete. They have more vitamins than, seed that's been sitting on the pet store shelf for who knows how long. But really, we should all provide supplements. And we're going to talk about those in a second. What about worms would be part of their diet? Yeah, these are mealworms, and certainly canaries and finches are going to eat some insects in the wild, and you can buy mealworms at the pet store, and you can feed them on an occasional basis. It wouldn't be a regular part of their diet. Now, this leafy green here, that can be a regular part of their diet. So the next page that I'm going to go to talks, actually, I'm going to go to the whiteboard and talk about this. So, supplements and treats should be a regular part of birds' diet. So, the base of the diet can be either seed or pellets. Pellets are better, but not all birds will eat them. So you can add in fruit. Strawberries are good, grapes, banana, apples, although not the seeds. The seeds of apple contain a little tiny amount of cyanide in it. It's not enough to harm us because we've got a bigger body size, but it can hurt the bird. So all of those fruits are good. Vegetables, Blueberries would be great too. Yeah, absolutely. Blueberries and raspberries would also be very good. Blackberries. Leafy greens are good, not kale. Birds should not be getting kale. Broccoli is excellent, and birds generally love it in my experience. Carrots, those may need to be, you may need to shred those. Sprouts are good. Okay, I see someone's having Wi-Fi issues right now. Thanks for letting me know. I'm going to remind everybody, this is being recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. So if you have Wi-Fi issues, you can always go back and watch it on YouTube. Why not kale? I knew somebody was going to ask me that one. So kale has something called oxalic acid in it. And in humans, too much kale consumption can cause kidney stones. Same thing in birds, except their bodies are much smaller and they're much more sensitive to it. Spinach. Spinach would be fine for birds. Yeah, that would be a good leafy green. What else? I'm blanking on my leafy greens right now. Romaine lettuce is excellent. Iceberg, not so much. So for leafy greens, romaine, spinach, chard, those would be the kinds of leafy greens that would be good. Escarole, sure. Dandelion greens, as long as there wasn't pesticide or insecticide sprayed on them. Dandelion is good. Iceberg lettuce is largely water and there's no nutritional value or not very much. Arugula. Arugula would be good. Basil, not necessarily a leafy green, but it's a leaf. That could certainly be something you could try them on. Parsley, you could try. Cilantro, you could try. Not sure if the bird would like that or not. I would avoid rosemary or sage or chives, absolutely. What % of their diets? I'm going to get to that, Fiona. Good question. Jumping ahead a little bit. So other things, you can make whole grain breads. I don't recommend whole grain bread that you buy at the grocery store. Those tend to have a lot of sugar added, but you can find recipes online for birdie bread. Arugula is a leafy green vegetable. It's used sometimes in salads. It's got a stronger, sharper taste to it than something like romaine. Yeah, pizza's not an appropriate food for the bird, Fiona. Mealworms, I showed you those in the previous slide. With all of these, you want to wash them. Amazingly, you don't have to chop most of these up. So You can slice a strawberry in half and give it to a zebrafinch and it'll be able to eat it. All of these preferably would be organic or grown yourself. You want to avoid pesticides and herbicides on all of these. Another thing that I like to give birds, that I would give my birds a lot when I had them, would be wild harvested seeds. So grass seeds, anything you see wild birds eating. So echinacea, which are those, oh shoot, there's probably a common name for them that I don't know. They're purple flowers, they're kind of daisy shaped. Birds love those seeds. There's a plant called liatris that grows real well in New England. Birds love those seeds. So those can also be given as treats. And the question came up, what percentage? So pelleted diet should be the majority of the diet. If you're feeding pellets, you know, we're talking 75% or more of the diet. Mixed seeds from the store, that's a little trickier. It still should be more than half, but birds will do exactly what kids do. They pick out the junk food. You know, you give kids the opportunity, they're going to eat that pizza, not with arugula on it, I bet, every single night of the week. Same thing with the birds. The treats should be primarily vegetables. Secondarily, fruits. Too much fruit can cause diarrhea in birds, but it's a lot of fruit. Mealworms are the kinds of things that maybe once a week treat. So that's kind of where that stands. Theoretically, a pelleted diet does not need any kind of supplement, and you could just feed the bird that. And supplement, you know, just because birds like that. It's great mental stimulation for them. Geez, okay. We're out of time. You guys asked some really good questions today. So this is kind of where we're going to end today. We're going to come back next time, and I'm going to talk about kinds of foods that you should absolutely never give to your pet birds. And then we'll talk about things like caging and social behavior of these birds, these small songbirds, as well as potentially breeding them. Any last minute questions? All right, great. In that case, I'll see everybody next time.